start, I want to intro Michael, who is actually an Endeavor mentor from Mexico, now joining us in Miami. He is an expert in innovation, education, and entrepreneurship. As a consultant, his expertise is in strategic innovation. He's actually the CEO of Novak Innovation, which is a company focused on the human behavior and is focused on the future that supports companies in competing in markets of tomorrow. As a speaker and as an active mentor in the Endeavor network, he talks a lot about topics such as design thinking, innovation, leadership, and the future of education all around Latin America. So we're super excited to have him here today with us. So, Michael, I was just telling everyone a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today in relation to design thinking and innovation, as these are super important drivers of scale, right? And so many different startups. I asked everyone, or at least some people, to put their cameras on so we can make this interactive and for them to also send their questions on the chat, okay? But in any case, I'll turn the word now to you. Guys, if you have questions, you can message me privately or send it in the chat directly, okay? But I hope you guys enjoy. And Michael, all with you now.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen first, and then I'll begin.
Perfect.
So I'm sharing my screen. Let me start my presentation, and I'm gonna switch this just so let me. Do you see the full screen there, or do you see my notes?
No, I see the full screen. And for everyone watching, if you want, you can pin Michael's video so that you see him. He will probably see everyone, but you can see just him, okay? But yes, Michael, all good.
Great, thank you. So I'm really happy to be here, guys, and to share a little bit of our thoughts with you. So one of the things that I talked about with Rebecca a few weeks ago was regarding what approach how should we approach this session? And because innovation is a big concept, it's a big word, in my opinion at least, and I'm sure you guys have heard also something like this. There are only two kinds of efforts that we do in business. Some of them have to do with exploration, and some of them have to do with exploitation. So for me, innovation has to do with exploration. I mean, innovation and entrepreneurship in general, and administration or management has to do with exploitation. So when you think of innovation, it's as big as a concept as administration or management. So that's why it's hard to pin down. And we thought a lot about why have we been thinking and talking and doing so much things around innovation and entrepreneurship in the last 2 decades. And it has to do with the acceleration of the world. Since the 1950s, the population has been growing in the world tremendously, also GDP and energy, communication, travel. So we're more people, with more money, more connected. And so that's why things are moving faster. And the faster that things are moving, the life cycles of business shorten. So in average, I'd say, in the middle of the 20th century, the life cycle of a business would, one business without reinventing it too much would last us for about 4 to 5 decades. But, since the turn of the century, that lifespan or life cycle has been shortening towards more like 10 to 80 years. So there's, a heightened need to reinvent ourselves more. In the past, we could just, find the problem, develop a solution, and then exploit it for 4 decades. And now we find the problem, develop a solution, and we need to reinvent that solution every 4 years in order to keep ourselves alive. So the problem is, or the challenge is that we have learned business around exploitation. All the paradigm, everything we do has to do with management and administration, and the rules for that are very different than innovation and entrepreneurship. So that's kind of, that's why I wanted to approach this from a very strategic point of view, because design thinking, it's a very, I think it's a very encompassing process and that set of principles and tools. I would say that it's the operational system of innovation. But where should we focus it? And that's kind of what I want to share with you guys today. Rebecca already introduced me. I'll be brief. So my profile, my background has to do with, I started out as an educator, then I became a consultant. I studied business and also architecture, and I've become an entrepreneur over the years. At the beginning, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go through the route of creativity or business, because I grew up in a creative environment. My parents, they founded a design school in Mexico in the 70s, one of the first ones in Latin America. So I grew up surrounded by creativity, but I also realized that creativity didn't have a lot of impact, respect, or monetary retribution in the world of business. And I was a little bit more ambitious. So I went through the route of business at the beginning. I studied business administration, and I loved part of it. And then I realized that, that there are other parts of it that I didn't love or didn't suit well with my personality. So eventually I switched towards architecture. And when I was ready to become an architect, or I thought I was, my father had passed away when I was 14. So my mother told me, you need to come and you need to take over the family business when I was 26, actually, which was crazy. And I said, okay, I'll do it for a little while. And I did it for 15 years. I discovered in the early 2000s that you no longer had to choose between creativity and business, because innovation as an emerging discipline was fusing both of them. And when I realized that, I decided that was my calling, that was what I wanted to do, and that was the right fit for me and for the school at the beginning. So I decided to turn it into a design thinking innovation school, not just a design school, which was harder, way harder than I thought it was going to be. Not just because expertise, knowledge, and books and toolkits were not available back in 2003, but because designers didn't really want to become design thinkers, which was a surprise for me back then. So it took me a while. Eventually, we developed an educational model that was recognized by the OECD as as an innovation, educational innovation environment, and it became a benchmark for future educational models in the world, which we were honored. And then I decided I wanted to learn properly, because I had learned about innovation very empirically, and so I wanted to study a master's degree, but I was leading the family business. I couldn't do a full-time master's in business, in innovation, which pretty much didn't exist. So I designed one myself, and I submitted it to the Ministry of Education here in Mexico. Was accepted 2008, and then I realized I didn't have any expertise in Mexico, so in order to teach that. So I reached out to consultants all over the world, the best consultancies in the world, and I asked them to come and teach on weekends, and they did. I also reached out to lecturers in the best business schools, Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, etc. And also they accepted to come and teach on weekends. So I studied my own master's. Of course, I opened it to the public, and I partnered with one of them, with his Idris Moti, in 2012. I left the family business. I started, I started the Latin American office for Idea Couture in 2012. They sold it, and I sold my part in 2016 to Cognizant, this technology company based out of New Jersey. And I started over, also as a consultant, Novak Innovation, and I started an executive education, business and innovation, continuous education school called School of Change. So this is where I am. So that's me. So that's basically me. We are a strategic innovation firm. We do projects, but we also do teaching through this other brand called School of Change. And basically what we do is we help companies and leaders. I'm sorry about this typo. We help companies and leaders, in North and Latin America, that want to strive for greatness, and they need to fight irrelevance in a dynamic, changing environment. Because the faster than things change, the higher the risk for us to become irrelevant and lose our product market fit in the marketplace. So what we do is we do strategy, research, and design, and we do it with different brands all over North and Latin America. And we have devised what we call a framing workshop, which is what I want to share with you guys today. It's a very, very intuitive, very simple, very playful, I would say, approach to strategic innovation. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a brief introduction to the concept. I'll explain a little bit later. And then we're going to spend a few minutes doing some assessments of our business and what surrounds it. So we'll do a macroeconomic assessment, very intuitive. I know these things sound very abstract and deep, but we found a way to make them very intuitive, and you'll see. Also, we'll do an assessment of our organizational strengths, our industry, and our competitive advantage or product market fit. And through that assessment, we're going to be able to find which is the proper approach and focus of our resources and energy in order to do the right kind of innovation. So that's kind of the focus and the objective for me for this session is, changing is important, particularly if things are changing all around us, but change has many different, colors. So which is the right kind of change for us, right? So that's basically it. And then we'll do some Q&A later on. So in order to frame a little bit the importance of this in this very dynamic, moment in time that we're living, I wanted to start sharing with you guys part of a report that I found online a few months ago, late 2019. There's this company that I'm sure you've heard of. It's called Envision. It's a platform where you can design your digital products, and this platform is used by some of the most recognized digital companies in the world, like Airbnb, HBO Max, etc. And they did a very thorough worldwide assessment survey of innovation adoption in all kinds of companies. This was done in 24 industries, a lot of 2,200 companies. I'm sorry, 24 countries, 72 industries. So it's the most encompassing innovation adoption study done in the world. At least that's what they claim. And they found something very interesting. They found that there are several levels of adoption that make a lot of sense once you see them. They found that a lot of companies have what I changed the names because in order to make them easier to grasp. So the first level, I call it cosmetic, which is focus on discourse, look and feel. So basically it's the way you typically start. So you say we're innovative, we put it on our mission, our values, our objectives, but most of what we're doing is cosmetic, has to do with what we say and how we look, or how our product or service looks and feels. It's not very deep, right? That's the first level. Second level, they eventually start doing some workshops like the one we're doing right now. And they do a little bit of consumer research, a little bit of design thinking, talking to consumers, and gathering everyone to do ideation and stuff like that. So a lot of focus on workshops. Eventually, they realize that there are a lot of ideas that come out of those workshops, and that nobody is being accountable for them. And it's really hard because, well, I mean, if you're part of the operations team, you're already very busy, more than 100% of your time, and you get paid, to perpetuate the current business. And in the world of innovation, it's not about perpetuating the status quo, it's about perpetrating the status quo. So they realize that there's a contradiction, and you can't expect operations people to be in charge of innovation. They can be they should be part of the process, but they cannot be in charge because you pay them for something different, and they're already very busy. So what they do on the level 3 is I translated this morning and it's full of typos, I'm sorry. So they devise a dedicated team that it's full-time employees, a couple of them at least. And then once that's in place, they eventually learn about the importance of agile innovation, using data-driven experimentation approach, and because innovation is iterative, and they realize that. And eventually, lastly, level 5, they realize that the barriers between innovation and strategy should blur in order to find the right focus, where to focus your, the resources and energy. So it's no wonder, and I'm sure you would expect what I'm going to say, that if you compare the kind of impact that innovation has on companies that adopt it at a cosmetic level, it's very different than the impact that it has, on the companies that adopt it at a strategic level. And the difference is really staggering, right? The impact is way, way, way bigger if you see it as a part of your strategic planning and strategic approach. That's why this is what we're going to do today. So they share some some indicators that they gathered through this study, and they compare companies level 5 to companies level 1 in 4 indicators, and the difference is tremendous. So revenue wise, companies that adopt innovation at a strategic level have 4x the amount of revenue, cost reduction 5x, time to market 6x, valuation, and this is because the market has been valuing innovation as something that has a lot of more impact and at least the same amount of profit that the status quo, at least the same amount of risk as the status quo. So that's why it's 26x valuation, regardless if it's a public or private company. So why aren't more companies doing this? It's the question that I'm sure everyone is asking themselves, and it's the right question to ask, in my opinion. So one of the challenges is what I just said, that we fail to understand that innovation is as big as a topic as administration, and we tend to think of it as those workshops and those cosmetic approaches. So it's really hard, and what makes it hard is that innovation could be focused on any part of your business model, right? I mean, if you use the business model canvas just as a framework to think about it, you could focus innovation in very different places for very different purposes, and we need a logic. We need a process to help us see which one is the right one for us. What do I mean by this? So, a lot of innovation and design thinking, it has to do with understanding who is your customer client and what are their needs. So let's use a few examples just to visualize this. So Netflix, typical example, some of them. The difference between, and this is a very old example, but a very revealing one in my opinion. The main difference between Blockbuster and Netflix at the beginning of the 20th century, 2000s, was in terms of how they saw themselves. And this is something that I heard Reed Hastings on a podcast tell, founder of Netflix. He said, the people of Blockbuster, the question that they asked themselves is, how can we be the leader in retail movie rental stores? That's the question that they asked themselves. And what he says is, we did something different. The question that we asked ourselves was, how can we fight or combat boredom and loneliness? It's a very different approach. And you would see that the answers to the question, how can we be the leader of movie rentals in retail stores, has a very limited amount of answers. It's a bigger catalog, more selection, a better service, and charge less for late fees and stuff, right? And in the case of Netflix, this understanding that the problem that they solved was boredom and loneliness, allows them to move through paradigms, right? So the answer was sending DVDs through mail to your house in the early 2000s, and then the answer became streaming content, and then the answer became developing original content, and then the answer became algorithms that recommend the right kind of content, and so on and so forth, right? So that's one approach, understanding who is your customer and what is the problem that you're solving. Another one is the customer experience, which is the touch points and how they feel on every step of the interaction that they have. For me, a great example of this is PillPack, which is a company that was acquired a few years ago by Amazon, which it's not a different product. They sell vitamins and OTC medicine and also prescription drugs. But what they do is that they deal with your insurance, and I'm sure you know this, they deal with your doctor. You don't have to go to the drugstore. It's delivered to your home. Not only that, it's packaged with the right mix of medication that you need to take each day at different times of the day, so you never forget whether you took them or not. So it's not about the product in this case, it's about the experience. Some other cases, for example, how do you define your your product or your offering of services or products. And Blue Apron, for me, it's a great example of this, because you probably know that when they started out a few years ago, they initially wanted to sell you ingredients. They had great deals with farmers and people who do meats, and they said, we can sell you these things directly to your house. They don't go through the supermarket, so you get better quality at a better price. But still, they realized that if they package it like that, the willingness to pay for those ingredients was very low. So when they realized that they could package it in an experience where you learn to cook like a great chef every night of the week, they would compete with Olive Garden and casual dining restaurants. So that's a way to use innovation to define your offering. Or for that would be Blue Apron. Or for example, how do we staff? How do we use innovation to staff? And I'm sure you heard. I mean, there's Uber and there's TaskRabbit and stuff. And for example, what we do Novak Innovation is that we have this other brand that it's called School of Change. And basically, the classes that we teach, we are able to see people who are leaders, people who are passionate about innovation. We see them in action, and then we recruit them sometimes, especially if some of them already work for companies, some of them are entrepreneurs, but a lot of them are interested in working with us. And that this is we think an innovative approach to recruiting. Or for example, who should we partner with? I'm sure you've heard the example of Waze, that they initially partnered with the users. The users were the one who helped them map the cities at the beginning. Or finally, what is a revenue model, or what is the willingness to pay? Panera, just before the pandemic began, they started to, you probably know this, they started to experiment with a subscription model for coffee and selected items. And it was a hit. And they were rolling out on every other Panera in the US. And they had plans to eventually include more items and develop a subscription model for different packages of things. But then the pandemic came, and I'm not sure what happened after. So plenty of options where to focus your innovation. Not only that, but on each of those options, you could do it at an incremental level, same client, same category of products, or at an evolutionary level, different market, same products, or new products for the same market. Or you could do it at a disruptive level, new products, new clients. So this is the paradigm. This is the difficulty. So you could focus your innovation efforts on any of the elements of your business model, and on any of those elements, you could do it at a different scope, at a different level. So it's complex, right? So how do we do this? How do we find the right approach for us? It's not there's no one size fits all. There's no one recipe. So there's a strategic planning tool. It's a little bit of a dark tool that not a lot of people use, that I love, and we found a way to simplify it. The reason why it's not used more widely is because it's complex. But if you simplify it, it's a beautiful tool. It's called space analysis. And SPACE stands for strategic positioning and action evaluation. What this means is that there's no one size fits all. You need to evaluate your innovative strategic actions in relationship to your strategic positioning. So this is what it means.
Innovation is a big word. Incremental innovation, radical innovation, evolutionary innovation, product innovation, service innovation, customer experience innovation, process innovation, brand innovation. Where do we focus? How do we start? At Novak, we have developed framing sessions, a way to identify pains, prioritize issues, define action, create alignment, and ignite change.
So this is what we're going to do at a very simple and intuitive scope today. So what is the right kind of innovation for us. So what we need to do is analyze our business model first, right? We need to say, okay, so what is our competitive advantage? I mean, how is our product market fit with the market right now? Now that things have changed, especially. And also we need to evaluate our strengths as an organization. And by strengths, I mean talent, infrastructure, financial position, brand, etc. Right? So these two things are important, but they're only at the micro level of our business. What's going on outside determines your strategic positioning, right? So you also need to look at, macro trends, the macroeconomic environment and how it's affecting you. It might be affecting you positively, or it might be affecting you negatively, depending on your industry and category of products and services. And you also need to look at your industry. Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Is it, highly competed? Is it saturated? Is it attractive or not? So these four elements determine your strategic positioning, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to evaluate our competitive advantage, or I'd rather call it product market fit. I call it product market fit instead of competitive advantage because it's not about your position in relation to the competition. It's about your position in relation to the most important and underserved needs of the customer segment that you're trying to approach, right? So it's people centric, not competition centric. So that's why I rather call it product market fit instead of competitive advantage. So it's about your offering and how it fits with what the market needs right now, from the perspective of them, not from the perspective of you. Today, we're going to use what we think their perspective is, because we don't have time to do anything else. But I think it's going to be enough. Then we also analyze or assess our organizational strengths to face what's going on out there right now. Our processes, infrastructure, financial position, our credentials and credibility, knowledge, talent, etc. And also, of course, the attractiveness of our industry right now, as is right now. Don't try to analyze it as it was or as you would want it to be. Try to be as objective as you can. And then finally, how the macroeconomic changes are affecting you, right? It's not about if they're good or bad, because the macroeconomic environment is good or bad depending on who you are, what you do, right? It affects different industries in different categories differently. So it's not absolute, it's relative. So the logic is this, right? So let's say your product market fit, the way you address the most important and underserved needs of your market are in direct opposition to the industry attractiveness. What do I mean by this? Look at the balls, the little circles. So if your industry is very attractive, right? I have a few questions here, I'm sorry. Veronica says, or Vero says, how would you apply the space tool to multi-industry companies such as Amazon? I think it needs to be done on an industry basis, in category even. So I think it has to be done at the category basis. And if you want to do a corporate strategy, I think that you need to take a big picture view of all of those and find an average. That would be my approach. And also Gabriel says, can you use space a design tool for startups that are not? Yes, of course. Because in reality, what you can say is, the only thing that you don't have is a product market fit. But what you can analyze is how well are current competitors addressing the needs of the market. That's what I would say. So basically, again, the little circle on industry attractiveness moved to number 5, which is a very attractive industry. So what does that mean? That means that it's most likely highly competed, that so there's a lot of competition. The competition is fierce, I'm sure, because it's attractive industry. So your product market fit needs to be very strong. You cannot compete if you have a bad product market fit. It needs to be great, right? In order to achieve that. So you see the relationship between those. Also, on the lower left side, if the macroeconomic changes, like generational changes, cultural changes, technological changes, environmental, political, legislative, etc. If those changes are affecting you negatively, right now, at any moment in time, actually, you need to be strong, right? You cannot be weak and compete if the macroeconomic circumstances are affecting your industry negatively. You need to be strong, right? So this is the logic. So what's interesting about this is, how do you take into account all of them, through a systemic lens? And this is where space analysis comes into play, right? So let me share a few scenarios, and by doing that, I'm explaining how the exercise is going to work. So let's say that you are in an industry that it's highly attractive. Let's say that. I mean, right now you are in an industry that has been positively affected by what's going on right now. And let's say that you have a great product. The market fit is perfect from the lens and perspective of your clients. Not because you think it's great. I mean, if you think that your product's great, but the market doesn't understand it, then you shouldn't put that your product is great. Doesn't mean that it's bad, but if the market doesn't understand it, you cannot say that it's great. It's because it's from the perspective of your clients. And then let's say that you are in a strong position, which it would mean that the environment is affecting you positively. What does this mean? This means something very interesting. If you connect those dots, you're going to realize that it starts to suggest where should you focus your innovation efforts, right? So it needs to be towards what? Towards increasing your advantage in relationship to the competitors. Why? Because you're strong in a good industry with great product, and the environment is affecting you positively. It's like, go all in. And this is where you focus on innovation, on your product and service, on the customer experience, and on your brand. But this is what's interesting. Most people think that this is what innovation means. This is what innovation means for companies that are in a strategic position, that it's positive on all counts. If you're not in that position, product innovation, customer experience innovation, and brand innovation is not for you. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. Let me show you a few other scenarios. So let's say that you are still in an attractive industry, but the environment is affecting you negatively. So by consequence, you are in a weak position. You cannot be in a negative environment with a strong position, because it's affecting you negatively. So you're in a weak position. And you have a great product. So where should you focus your innovation efforts? It's a different scenario. It's a different approach. It makes no sense to focus on product experience and brand because you are weak. You don't have what it takes to focus on that. You should focus internally, towards the operations, because that's where you're weak. So you should focus on process, talent, infrastructure, technology, and so on and so forth, right? Now something that is very important, that this mapping, it's as is, right? It's not as you want it to be. So that's very important for the exercise. It's as is. A third scenario would be, you are in a weak position in an unattractive industry with a poor or bad product market fit, and the environment, it's affecting you negatively. So this is different, right? It's a different approach. What does this mean? It makes no sense to invest in a product experience or brand where you don't have the strength or the product to compete. It makes no sense to strengthen yourself if the industry is poor, it's unattractive, why would you do that? Right? It makes no sense. So what you need to do actually is explore. It's find another industry where you are strong and where the variables affect you positively, right? And then, there was a fourth one, and I don't know what happened. I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Then the fourth one, I'm going to explain it because I didn't put the scenario for some reason. I erased it. But then let's say that you are at a strong organizational position, with a bad fit with the market in a poor industry. But if the environment affects you positively, then what you need to do is diversify, right? So just find an adjacent category of products and services where you can thrive, right? And I'm sorry that I thought that I included that scenario. So there are 4 things that you can do depending on your position. You can focus on product, experience, or brand when everything is positive for you. You should focus internally when everything is positive, but the environment and your strengths. You should focus on diversifying when everything is negative, but the environment. And you should focus on pivoting or exploring a different industry when everything is negative. So what are we gonna do? I'm gonna share with you guys a link in order to do an exercise. This link is to a platform that we've been using for a while. It's become very popular now in the pandemic for doing workshops. You've probably heard of it. It's called Mural. It's like mural, like a mural. And so it's like, it's a place where we can collaborate. And in this case, we don't need to collaborate because I think that each of you is in a different company. So what I did is I created, 40 murals, one for each of you. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna send you a link. I'm not sending it right now. I'm gonna send it after I explain the exercise. So what we're gonna do is once you enter that link, you're gonna see this big poster like thing. And you're gonna see that there's the same, the same graphic that we just used right now. And you're gonna see that in order to evaluate the different elements, you have cards. Those cards are situations. So you're gonna read them. Basically what you need to do is start by the gray ones, which is the environmental ones. And you read them, you say, which of these are things that are affecting my business right now? Now, in my category of business, which of these are, things that are affecting us? And what you're gonna do is you're gonna select those, and just once you click on them, you can drag them towards this part of the poster, and so you're gonna drag 3 or 4 of those, right? And once you do that, once you've done that, you're gonna be able to very intuitively assess your industry attractiveness. In this case, let's say if I'm a restaurant and there's new generations of people who are eating better, there's decreasing demand for in restaurant dining, and there's economic stability and environmental changes because of the pandemic. So, and there's maybe also one that it's a wild card. If there's anything that you want to add, and you say, how should I assess the environment? I'm sorry, not the industry, the environment. So it's poor, right? It's bad. So you drag that little dot, the gray dot, and you say, wait, see, if it's poor, it's a 1 or 2 or a 2.5. And that's the first thing that you're going to do. Once you have done that, then we're going to continue the exercise. And then we already evaluated the environment, macroeconomic environment. Now we're going to go to the organizational strengths, the red ones, because those are the ones that are in direct opposition to the environment. So it's the same exercise. There are a few situation cards. You're going to read them out. And you're going to select 2 or 3, maybe even 4 of them. And which of these are related, represent what's going on in your business right now. So for example, sales are dropping. We don't see the big picture because we're overwhelmed by the situation. We have the lack of abilities in order to maybe change our business model if you're a restaurant, and there's resistance to change. Not everyone understands why we need to reinvent ourselves. We don't know whether this is going to last or not. So should we reinvent ourselves? We don't know. So once you did do that, then you say, okay, so how do I evaluate my organizational strengths? So more or less, so I put a 3, right? And now you have that. So you can zoom out, zoom in, drag and drop those cards. It's very easy. And then you go to the next one, right? Once you've done that, now you go to the black ones, which are the industry ones, because that's how the logic works. You evaluate organizational strengths against the environment, and then industry against the product or service, right? So it's the same thing. You read the cards, you pick the ones that represent somewhat what you're facing in the industry. It doesn't need to be exactly, right? And you drag them there. And once you've done that, there are new competitors, like dark kitchens, and people are addicted to discounts because they don't have money, and suppliers are eating our margins because Postmates charges 30% to deliver the food. So how do we assess the industry? So it's bad. Right now it's bad, the restaurant industry as an example. And once you've done that, the last thing you want to do is to use the yellow ones to assess your product market fit. I'm sorry. Again, I missed, what happened to my slides? I'm not sure. I think I erased them accidentally. So you do the same thing with the yellow ones, and you pick the ones that represent how your product or service is addressing current needs. And you move the yellow dot, and you will have this, you will be able to connect the dots and see where should you focus. Should you focus on pivoting, on diversifying, on strengthening your product, brand, or experience? Or should you focus internally in your processes, technology, talent, etc.?